Agree or disagree with the following statement. It is okay to be white.
No, that's not okay. It's terrible to be white.
No.
No,
Y'all got too much. Yeah, y'all got
who
too much
want
to
to be
be.
white? That's awful.
No.
I want you guys to understand why the radical ideology of Marx that defines the modern leftist ideology requires two things. It requires resentment, and it requires that you look at the relationship between any two people being defined by power. Once you make the egregious cognitive error of believing that every relationship between people is defined solely by power, resentment becomes a natural conclusion because there is no way to recourse a dynamic that is purely defined by power, because that relationship is tyrannical. You can't reach the other person with a meritorious argument or statements that make sense and would warrant a change, or even by a commonly shared standing in objective morality. Now, the reason why the left believes solely in power is a confession as well as an ideological statement. What you are confessing once you acknowledge that you only view the world in terms of power disparities, is that you don't believe in the mechanisms that I mentioned before, such as meritocratic systems of vetting or dialogue in reason and rationality supported by free speech to glean an understanding of reality that is better than what you had before and is actionable. They don't believe in any of that. And so the admission is, what they are admitting about themselves is, their ideology does not support rationality or reason. Because if they insist that there is only such thing as power that governs relationships between people, then their ideology can operate purely on the axis of power. It doesn't have to explain anything to you. It doesn't have to justify anything to you. It doesn't even have to make sense. And it doesn't have to acknowledge that an objective truth exists, even conceptually, to aim at and strive for. Instead, all they have to do is say, this is what's going to happen. And if you disagree with us, there's no such thing as you even disagreeing with us. We're just going to call you a bad person and proceed anyway, because we've already said there is no such thing as you engaging in anything other than power. This is why their ideology is black and white. You are either with the radical left and therefore obtain counterfeit virtue, or you are against them and have levied against you any number of slanderous buzzwords, like racist or there's an endless number of them depending on the person that they'll attack. I mean, if it's Elon Musk, then they will use billionaire as a pejorative. They will use white supremacist. If it's Andrew Tate, they will use misogynist. Any person that goes against their ideology will meet these attacks. Now, because the doctrine of Marx is so perverse and actually somewhat of a representation of the inverse of an objective analysis, because what he does is he takes objective truth and he inverts it. He bases axiomatic beliefs on the opposite of what reality is. Their representation, the way they act, the mystique, the almost unbroachable, mysterious nature of this woke, degenerate ideology that claims to be good while simultaneously being discriminatory and reprehensible, leaving people scratching their heads thinking, what is this? How do I interact with a woman who is so blatantly racist and yet thinks she's a good person? The answer is that they are possessed by this ideology of Marx that tells them that they don't have to be beholden to an objective moral truth. They don't have to be beholden to rationality. They don't have to be beholden to reason, because their ideology dictates that there is only power. There is no truth. There's only power. And you see this manifested in the writings of George Orwell in 1984. A defining aspect of the tyranny is that everyone is required to lie all the time, and there is only allegiance to the party. Even questioning whether or not the party is right or wrong is a thought crime, and it's not because you're challenging the party per se. The much more deadly thought crime to the tyrannical regime is that you are supposing that an objective truth exists to be found outside of the tyranny. And that's what you're seeing here. That's what you see manifested when people say reprehensible things while having a straight face, thinking they're the good guys. It's an inversion of truth, but it's worse than the type of right-wing fascism we've seen in the 20th century, because the radical left, unlike right-wing fascism, doesn't believe that objective betterment exists, that objective truth exists. And so their ideology is only defined by many different series of unfathomable resentment in different domains. They are confessing they don't believe in truth. They're actually doing more than just confessing that they don't believe in truth. They are setting the stage for a regression of morality and totalitarianism that is so indefensible, so outside the bounds of any sane person's upbringing or experience, that it could only exist in an environment where you don't believe in anything besides power. Which is very strange, because the traditional liberal movement used to be based in an idea of progressivism and moving forward to make progress. So there was the acknowledgement that an ideal existed, at least in principle, to be strived for, and also that it was worth aiming at. But the idea that power is the only thing that matters, that might makes right, in a sense, is a very old idea that is completely antithetical to progressivism. As a matter of fact, that's how the world was for thousands of years. The side that was stronger, the side that was willing to commit violence, the side with a bigger army, was right by default. There was no such thing really as an acknowledgement of objective reality outside the bubbles of Athens and the very, very most intellectually upward striving pursuits of ancient Greece, and of course there was the undercurrent set forth by people like Socrates. But for most of human history, might made right. And this is what leftists are attempting to return to, because they don't want to be held accountable. All aspects of Marxism, all aspects of the degenerate ideology that manifests itself in terms of modern feminism, where women are told and encouraged to hate men, hate masculinity, and even label masculinity as toxic, it is all derivable through the fact that they are afraid of objective accountability coming from objective frameworks. They don't want to be held accountable by truth. They don't want to have to answer to reality. They want to be ultimate narcissists. That's also why you see in this video she's being ultimately narcissistic. Because how narcissistic do you have to be to say something blatantly evil, blatantly discriminatory, something that you wouldn't even expect to hear in civilized society 200 years ago, and still think that she's a good person? The left mandates narcissism because it actually defines the way they look at reality. They think that they're above objective frameworks, or at least they want to be, because they are constantly... let me explain something to you. When you find yourself denying reality constantly, as radical leftists do, in literally every domain of objectivism, whether that be biology, neuroscience, science, psychology, the list goes on, they're constantly reminded that they are subordinate to an objective truth, and that the claims that they make about reality are wrong, and that people can disagree with them while aiming and acknowledging that objective truth, and that infuriates them. And so they have to dismantle the notion, they have to dismantle the apparatus of you being able to make progress, you being able to aim at something, because they don't want to be held accountable by you engaging in that process, by you going past them and saying, wait a second, there's something greater than you, there's a truth to be discovered, and this truth renders your ideology completely incoherent from the bottom to the top. And here's the last point. The reason why they can't tolerate that is because they can't argue for their ideology using coherence. And this is the final layer of symmetry that is an emergent property of their ideology, given my analysis. Not only indefensible, it can't be advocated for in a coherent way. It can only be advocated for in an incoherent way, using broken intellectual systems, perversions of reason, rationality, logic. This is why they insist on power, because once they can establish a system that runs purely on power, they no longer have to make sense, they no longer have to argue with you. And as they are permanently at odds with objective reality, that is the end goal of the radical degenerate leftist. Guys, subscribe to the channel, like the video, and comment. Just comment something underneath, ask a question, disagree with me. Disagreement is fine, completely acceptable. It helps the YouTube algorithm if you comment and like the video or dislike it. It's the same. But follow me here and on X, guys.